Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spiritual Journey podcast. We're on episode 75. That's crazy, Stace. Wow. Record one every week, and I love this space. I'm looking forward to this episode. It's definitely going to be an interesting conversation. But before we go there, Stace, I'd love for you to introduce yourself. So introducing the stunning, the healer extraordinaire, and now published author, Stacey Brown. Stace, do you want to introduce yourself? Yeah, I've got to do it. I mean, come on.
I just, I never am going to be comfortable with that. But hi, friends. My name is Stacey. I'm intuitive. I do readings for people around the world through the Akashic Records. Nimesh and I do a beautiful joint reading, and I also do oracle card readings for people. I've been on a deep spiritual journey for the last 15 years that has led me to Reiki, and I'm a certified Reiki practitioner. I love this podcast, and I'm also an author. I just published my first book, Journey to Soul Center Discovering the Gift of Surrender. It's available on Amazon and Audible.
Wow, Stace. Always difficult following you, you know what I mean? But hi everybody, I'm Nimesh, and I am also a podcast host, podcast creator, spiritual coach, spiritual mentor, and an Akashic record reader and Akashic trainer. And I love this space. We get messages every week or from people who are hearing this podcast, and it's just amazing that it's reaching a global audience. Love the messages of encouragement we receive, but also people sharing about how much impact this podcast has had on their spiritual awakening. So I love this space. I'm excited about this topic. And I guess we always forget to mention, I just want to mention at the beginning that we do spiritual mentoring, we do coaching. We have an amazing life-changing program that is really has affected millions and helping millions, and not millions, hundreds, maybe through the ripple effect, millions. Um, but honestly, we love the program. It was channeled through the Akashic Records, which has changed our lives. And if anybody's interested, book a free discovery call. And we can share with you what the program includes and how we're changing lives.
Yeah.
And Stace, I always love starting every episode with talking about shining our light. It's really important we shine our light, um, especially in this phase. But it's even more important we shine a light on ourselves first. So I
Mhm.
would love asking you and starting the episode with asking you, Stacey Brown, have you been shining your light on you today?
So I love this question because it makes me stop and think, what am I doing for myself today? And I've been really wrestling with my physical activity, my routine. I was traveling and then I had guests, and there's just been so much going on. It was on the back burner. And today I made no excuses. I got on the treadmill for an hour, and I'm just reestablishing that habit. And sometimes we have to do a reset. So today was the beginning of a reset for me, and it felt really good. What about you?
Nice, nice. Yeah, and just to say, working with you, and I can definitely recognize the difference when you do that, the physical movement and physical workout when you do and when you don't. So I'm really glad that you started the day off like that. Today I've had a busy day. I've been back to back most of the day. Whenever I've had a break, I've just sat in the garden. Weather's still good in the UK, and but this weekend we had a really busy week last week. Lots of calls, lots of readings, lots of things going on. So this weekend I just decided, especially yesterday, just to reset. So I kind of took a day of just being. I did lots of meditation, some journaling, and just took a day for myself. Caught up with some friends, and that was really cool. Really reset my energy really well, and feeling great for the week ahead. Yeah, it's always good when we do take care of ourselves. So, but I'm excited for this episode. And this week we're going to be talking about times you've been angry with God/source. And it's always an interesting topic, right? And it's that as we talk about we're a soul having a human experience, there is going to be ups and downs, right? Part of the human experience is going to be expansive. It is going to be painful. It is going to be frustrating. And I know there's been many times with me where I have been angry with God. I've taken time out and I've really kind of had a strong conversation with God, and God can take it. whether you resonate with God or with Source, whatever one you resonate with, there's sometimes you want to have a serious conversation, and sometimes it's okay to shout at God, to swear at God, to have a straight up conversation, because you have all this energy, this emotion inside you, and you've got to find a way to release. And taking that time to really kind of have that conversation is a beautiful release, because you do feel better out of it. It doesn't mean that you still got to deal with whatever you're dealing with, but sometimes you wonder, when you're going through so much, you're thinking, well, why? As humans, you think, well, why does it need to be so painful sometimes? And you do question it. I know personally, I've had lots of conversations with God. I've also had conversations with my soul, thinking, because I know my soul agreed to this human experience. So it's like, well, why would you agree to this human experience? And I feel blessed in many ways. There's lots of things that that I feel very, very blessed about right now. Things are going really well, but there have been times on this spiritual journey when they have been challenging, and it's those times where I have taken time out and kind of had a serious conversation with God, had a conversation with my soul, saying, well, what was the purpose? Because I get, and I've taken time to really understand my human experience, my soul's journey in this human experience. I've accepted kind of why certain things have happened, and how I really understood how it's expanded me. I shared some of it in the last week's episode, where I shared my spiritual awakening, my journey to my path to awakening, let's call it. But honestly, there's been times where I really haven't understood why I've had to go through certain things. I talked in last week's episode about, really, a lot of my life, I've never really felt like I belonged. And really, there's been many times in my life where I've been searching for ways to belong, maybe to groups, maybe to friends. But I now know I'm not meant to belong, right? I'm meant to do something different here, which in many ways means I'm not meant to feel like I'm part of something, because I'm meant to create something new. And I'm sure a lot of the listeners, and I'm sure Stacey, you can relate to that too. So it's that, the journey we're on, accepting part of it, accepting all of it, is sometimes challenging, especially when it's painful. And Stacey, before we go into kind of some of the examples and kind of going on this journey, I'd love for you to share, what does it mean to you when I say to you, when have you been angry with God? What does that mean to you?
I mean, I've been angry with God for sure. I've had times where I have been so thrown off by what's placed before me. I mean, I remember very distinctly being really angry with God one day about the parents that I was given, and the fact that we're not connected. We're not loving. We're not embracing one another. Like there's just no relationship there. And I was pissed. And I was headed out on a run. And I mean, my feet were hitting the pavement. I was angry. I was frustrated. I was disappointed. And um, I like heard God. And he was like, "You're right. Like, I didn't give you the parents you deserved. But look what I did give you." And I started seeing all of these like snapshots of the people who had come into my life and helped me and assisted me on my journey. Not every moment that I've been angry with God have I had that instant clarity. Um, I was I don't even know if angry is the right word, but I don't know if I was feeling anger when Dylan was in the hospital, but I definitely remember wondering, where was God? Like, how was this going to be okay? How was I going to be okay? And experiencing that frustration. And I would say right now, I am a little angry with God, which is hard to say.
I was going to say, do you want to share?
I am in such a season of unknown right now. I just never pictured my life at this point in my life that I would be like, it would just be me and my daughter. Like I didn't picture that being my existence. I pictured my family being around me, and I pictured raising kids with a partner, and I'm just so thrown off from what I thought God and I had arranged together that, like, this plan, I'm like, I have no idea what you're doing. And I would say I've definitely had moments of being quite angry about it.
Yeah, and look, I can relate. It's like when I, started out, when I'd finished, if anyone said to me that, what's your path going to be, I'd always say, well, you know what, I'm going to have a really good career. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have kids, and that was what I thought my path was going to be. Sure, I thought I was going to do amazing things, and knew I was going to do amazing things, but that's not been my path, and it's just, I do wonder sometimes, right? Well, why am I meant to take a different path? But there has been insights. There has been times where I've known how my soul has expanded because I haven't followed the path I thought I was meant to take. And Stacey, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this time because it feels like a time where um, the next phase is unknown, right? It's that all of us have been through so much change, so much churning, so much unknown. If I look at the last 18 months, certainly with everything you've been through, you know, how much planning could you have done? Could we have done? And a lot of the stuff that we've created, a lot of it was a leap of faith, right? There was a lot of unknown, and I really feel a lot of people right now could relate to that.
Mhm.
Um, kind of, we really don't know what's coming next. I mean, when we talk about the spiritual journey, we've just agreed to show up in every way, right? And just trust in whatever's coming next. What that means personally, um, who knows? But what would your advice be to someone who can relate to what you're saying? There's a there's a knowingness in, we talk about it quite often in terms of what we're creating. But then again, when you look at your personal life and you question, well, hold on a second, God, this isn't what I thought we agreed, right? I thought we had an agreement, and it isn't how I thought things were going to look.
Mhm.
How do you deal with that?
Um, the same way that I deal with being angry with another person. I Some days I have to cry and just let myself feel it. Um, Sometimes I need to move my body and try to almost like move the vibration through me. Um, and sometimes I need to write down how I'm feeling, like what is this exactly that I'm going through, and kind of like sit with it. And sometimes I just have to trust fall. And I have to say, okay, I don't know what the next step is. I don't know what you have planned for me, but I'm open to whatever that is. Um, I find that a lot of times when I'm angry with God, it's because of my assumption that things were going to be a certain way instead of the acceptance of what they actually are.
That's deep. So the assumption that things were going to go a certain way, but accepting how things actually are. Acceptance of what's happening around us and who we are is always a stage. It's like I feel there's like always an underlying message that goes with all of our podcasts. And it starts with acceptance, right? You can't, well, I haven't got a time machine. Maybe somebody listening has a time machine. But, it's like, I can't change the things that already happened, right? You can't change the things that already happened. So accepting who you are is always a stage one.
Mhm.
But actually, awareness on its own, so when you become aware, then you've got to accept but then you've got to do something about it, right? You've got to kind of, okay, and that's where at least having a self-care routine. So I feel like we talk a lot about, kind of becoming aware, accepting, and then making sure you have a strong self-care routine, because sometimes we've got to just keep showing up and we don't know what's coming next.
Mhm.
And there is a consistency in what we share on a weekly basis. And, sometimes this spiritual journey, sure, we can talk about the modalities, we can talk about Akashic records, we can talk about soul contracts. There's so much to it, but maybe our spiritual journey is simple. Maybe it is about knowing that we're a soul having human experience, and sometimes we've got to accept it's a human experience. And once you become aware that we're a soul having a human experience and you accept who you are, maybe there's power in that acceptance.
Even if it's uncomfortable. I mean, really, like that's what this is. It's discomfort, right? From things looking different from the expectation that we had. And it's been really interesting for me to walk through this season, because nothing about my life looks the way that it did, 18 months ago. And there's not one area that's familiar.
It is
And
those expectations, though, right? It is expectations.
mhm,
And Stacey, if I look past, I haven't, you've been through some really deep experiences and kind of some painful experiences, and I wouldn't want to wish those to anyone. But if I look back at the last 18 months, God has shown off,
mhm,
right? We talk about God showing up and showing off, and there's been a lot of change in the last 18 months, but I do feel there's been times that God showing off, and I would encourage our listeners to think of those times. Well, what are the times when because it's like when we're going through those main painful experiences, when we're really angry at God, if we remember those experiences and actually what were the results of those experiences, then maybe we start to realize there was a reason and a pattern.
mhm.
And I get when you're in it, it's really hard. And we debated, whether I was going to share this in when we talked before we started recording. And the times I've been most angry with God, I've been angry with God about me many times, my soul. But the times I remember where I've been most angry is actually when it's been about somebody else.
Mhm,
And it's really interesting when you think about it. So, the time I've been most angry with God, and he just was when I heard about quite a few years ago now, but when I heard about my niece getting leukemia. She was really young at the time, and I have a big family. We hadn't faced a lot of cancer and those type of things. We'd lost a couple of years before that my sister-in-law to cancer. But then when somebody's so young, I couldn't understand it. My brain, my logical thinking at the time. This is before I started this spiritual path, but or at least as deep as I am now. But I couldn't understand it. I was like, no, God, this is totally unacceptable. This is not fair. Somebody's so young, and she's got so much life to live, and you know luckily she survived. She's a beautiful soul that's shining a light so beautifully. And it's really interesting. It's just just so happens it's the anniversary of her make a wish was to meet President Obama, and it's the 9-year anniversary of when she it's the anniversary, the 9 years anniversary of her meeting the president. And interestingly enough, it was he's her mum's divorced from her dad, so it was her mum, and she asked me to come along as like a surrogate parent. So 9 years ago today, I was with her, and we met the president. We met President Obama, who's whatever you think of him personally, I can tell you from what I felt from his soul is a beautiful soul. And I still don't fully understand, when people get that ill, especially when it's somebody so young. There's a reason. Um, she is a very different person because of what she went through. But she's shining her light. She's living her life. And I'm a very different person for sure for, kind of all of that because I went through it and clearly it's affected her and her mum. But both beautiful souls.
Mhm.
But there has been times, those are the times where I've really struggled, where, again, it's almost like I can deal with, I still struggle with it sometimes, but I can deal with when something happens to me. It's like, okay, you know what? It is what it is. I have to deal with it. But when it happens to somebody you're so close to, it's painful in a different sort of way. And in my kind of mindset right now, I know that everybody's got to have the human experience. Who am I to try and stop somebody having their human experience? It's not on me, right? It's not assigned to me. There are certain people that are assigned to us to help. There are certain people that are not. And I remember when I started this healing journey, I wanted to heal everybody that I loved, right? Oh my God, why would I not use these gifts I've got? Sometimes you got to realize that people are going to go through their own journey and they're not assigned to you.
Which
Yeah,
can be really hard.
but yeah, it's frustrating, right? Because you're like, well, hold on a second. Um, but yeah, I mean, I remember crying, I remember getting angry, I remember, kind of it was a process.
Mhm.
But I would highly recommend, when you're feeling that level of emotion where you're so angry, you don't know what to do with it. Go out into the field and scream, shout. People watch you, it doesn't matter, but just, you gotta, if it's like that amount of emotion, if you keep it inside you, it is like a volcano. It needs to come out in some kind of way. If you want to stay at home and just have a serious conversation with God, do that. If you want to shout to God, you want to swear to God, source, whatever you want to look at it, have it. If you want to have a kind of a serious conversation, say, I really want to understand this, maybe you'll get your answers if you're open to it.
Mhm.
Because again, like I was saying earlier, if you go back to your most painful experiences when, you've probably been most angry with God, you've probably had your biggest breakthroughs at the same time.
Mhm.
And how often do we focus on, the times when God's source, our guides, whatever you want to call it, shows off compared to when we feel like we've been let down? Stacey said it earlier. A lot of the time when we feel let down is because of our expectations.
Mhm.
We expect things to be a certain way. We expect things to, and where do those expectations come from? And those expectations come from our programming.
Mhm.
And it's the programming which says, this is how life should be. This is how, in terms of, what, you're going to find a loving partner, you're going to have kids, you're going to, kind of be together, you're going to have somebody to share your experiences with. That's a great image, right? That's the kind of what, in theory, what a lot of people want. Don't want to say everybody. Um, but like I know my soul's journey, have had to be long periods of my life where I didn't have a partner. But I know that my soul was meant to go through certain things that I had to do on my own. And I'd love to see my soul contract. Me, Stace, we joke about this all the time. I'd love to see my soul contract, with people and kind of whatever. But I know, there's, my soul was meant to expand in a different sort of way. I mean, another example is, I thought by now I would have got married, had kids, and all the rest of things I guess most people want. But I, I, I know that I have a special bond with all my nephews and nieces. I have 10 nephews, 3 nieces. And in certain ways, I've guided them at different times, and I have a different made sure they experiences things that I couldn't experience. And I know that the bond would be different if I had kids because my focus would have been on the kids. And actually, I have conversations with my nephews and nieces about that sort of thing all the time, and they acknowledge that that the relationship we have is different, and it's deeper than maybe it would have been. So it's that, what do you focus on when your expectations are not met? What if there's more magic that you experience because your expectations were not met. And are we open to seeing that magic?
Wow.
Stace, you have a smile on your face as if you're gonna, and it's like it's just an interesting topic, and it is a different perspective. And by the way, I know it's easy for me to say it. I can tell you when I'm feeling emotional, there's going to be times I'm going to be angry with God too, but it's just I've given myself time in terms of what I've been through as a person to reflect differently.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely think there's like processing time, right? Like when we're going through something in the heat of it, when I'm angry, I just need to be angry. I just have to get it out in whatever way and process it. And that's all I can feel. And I am sure as I'm sitting here that there are people who are listening to this podcast who are in a season of being super angry. And I think the bigger question is, okay, you feel the anger, what do you do with it? Because there are a lot of people that I've come into contact with who stay in the space of anger, and they have like a huge chip on their shoulder because of something that they went through or a family member went through, and they've allowed it to consume them in a way that they're angry all the time. And they're in that space and they're holding on to that anger tight and they don't want to let go. And so I think the question is, once you feel the anger, then what do you do with it? And it it is not an easy thing to process the anger, but I do believe that it's imperative to our growth as a soul in this life to process it the best that we can. I still have days where I wake up and I'm like, WTF, God? Like what are we doing here? Like, are you sure? And then I have these incredible experiences with, messages from people who have read my book, or a reading where someone gains some insight and clarity into things that they didn't otherwise know, or when we're doing our mentorship program and someone has a breakthrough. There are moments like that that keep me hanging on and going, there's a bigger vision here. There's a bigger purpose, and I've got to stay the course. And me being in that space of anger instead of acceptance isn't going to allow me the opportunity to use this experience for my highest good.
It's very true. It's that Stace, I remember it was the first time me and you spoke was on Clubhouse, coming up to nearly 2 years actually, but um, I connected with your vulnerability. And it's really interesting. It's like, when you hear somebody and you connect and you feel their vulnerability, sometimes we feel that connection. But actually, it's your ability to turn that vulnerability into purpose that when I think of what you've been through, I'm in awe of. Because how many people, as you say, stay in that vulnerable, that painful state? And it's not an overnight thing, right? It's not an overnight transition. But when you start to understand there's a reason behind that pain, you start to gain a different perspective. Maybe you start to realize that everything you've been through is you went through for a reason. It was part of your human experience. It's part of why you're here. It's part of um, just who you are. And if you start to ask a different set of questions instead of how is in from like victim mode, why does what's happened to me, God, why do you this is when you turn it to, well, hold on, how is this serving me? How is it expanding me? Then you start to get a different perspective. And actually, I just thought of it now that the other time I've been really angry with God from a personal perspective. I grew up I talk about it in previous episodes, but I grew up in a very loving environment and didn't have a voice. I had 4 brothers, 4 sisters, but I was a loving environment. So I had a very loving parents. And, my he passed away, kind of many years ago, right? So, um, I wasn't there when he passed away. He passed away in India. He was on holiday. He kind of knew he was going to leave this realm, and we kind of knew that that's where he was going. It's kind of weird, but I wasn't there, so I kind of accepted that painfully. And then, my mom passed away again many years ago, and I wasn't there when she passed away. Dad was in India. I can understand that. Mom lived in the UK. Actually, I saw her. I was traveling. I was on vacation. I was going on a cruise, Caribbean cruise, and so I saw her in the morning. She wasn't feeling well. I'm like, Mom, maybe I should just change the dates. And she's like, No, no, you go. And so I lived close to her at the time. So I was like, you know what? Okay, she's felt like this before, and she's recovered. I'll still go. And I happened to be on a spent a couple of days in Miami, and then we were going to go on a cruise. The cruise was just about to dock. I was actually with my sister and some friends, and I remember talking to my sister and saying, "Don't really feel right about this. There's something not quite right." We had a feeling, and but we still docked. We went, and actually, it was a kind of a cruise with it's one of these when you're at sea, you hear kind of talk. So it was a Bob Proctor cruise. There's Marion Williamson. It's quite a few years ago. So and as we left, like partway through, that's when Mom passed away. And I remember I was so angry with God. It's like, God, I understand I wasn't there with Dad, but why I'm not there when Mom passed away? And I would just, so obviously as soon as we docked to the next place, we were gonna try and get back. And I remember Bob Proctor taking time out to talk to us, right? Bob Proctor's a public speaker, he's really well known. But he took time, and he said, he asked me personally, how do I feel? And I'm like, honestly, I'm just really angry. And he said this one phrase. He's like, "You are where you're meant to be." And I'm like, hmm. And I remember that one phrase that just was said to me in passing. You are where you're meant to be is kind of what got me through getting back, not being there, having kind of dealing with the grief. And I'm sure my family was sick of that phrase by the end of it, but knowing that actually, you know what, I wasn't meant to be there, and I was exactly where I was meant to be. And in the spiritual work I've done, I have spoken to Mom, since, and she's kind of said to me that if me or my sister were there, she would have struggled to leave this realm. It was her time, so I wasn't meant to be there.
Mhm.
And humanly, I still can think about it. Mom, my parents haven't been around for quite a few years, and kind of how would my life be differently if they were here? But I know they're watching over me. I can feel them watching over me, and I know I wasn't meant to be there. So, you know, again, I'm sharing that just as a personal experience because we do have expectations, and we do question ourselves. I question myself. Well, hold on a second. Why did I leave? She was at home. She wasn't like she was in hospital or anything, but it's like I knew she wasn't well. Why did I leave? What if I'd stayed? Would things have been different? But who am I? If it's somebody's time to go, it's their time to go. I wouldn't have changed anything. So I was exactly where I was meant to be. And it comes down to that same thing you said earlier about expectations and acceptance. We have expectations of how some things are going to go, and we have expectations, but actually, it comes a point where we just got to accept that we are where we're meant to be. The only moment we can control is this moment.
So true. And I believe that that's where we can free ourselves is to accept that we are where we're meant to be. I spent so much of my life thinking of things in like the language of like right and wrong and good and bad. And what I've found is I do better being in a space of like there's a lesson in everything I'm going through. That it doesn't necessarily have to be a good experience versus a bad experience. It's simply an experience, right? And if I choose to have a takeaway from it, then I'm given that opportunity. I feel um like a wrestling sometimes with the anger because I can see like okay, if I hadn't gone through everything I went through with Dylan, I wouldn't have written a book. If I didn't write a book, I wouldn't be helping people around the world. Like I can think about that, but there are days where I'm challenged by that little part of me that's like, why in the hell did we have to go through this? Like, why did I have to sacrifice a marriage? Why did I have to embark on this season alone? And I when I bring myself back to like today and being present and in this moment, then I'm like, I'm exactly where I need to be. And so I find that there are some days where I can go all day and be in that space, right? But then there are other days where I have to moment by moment reset myself into the present moment, and you are where you're meant to be. Like this is what is meant to be. I don't know what determines when those thoughts overpower me. I know I probably sound really basic, but I know that I'm more vulnerable to those thoughts when I'm tired, when I'm hungry, when I'm depleted. And so I really have an awareness of like those things, like, okay, I'm having these thoughts because of these other things that I've let go. And so I would just encourage you, if you find yourself kind of having these flare ups of anger, like ask yourself first, are you in the present moment? Accepting where you're meant to be is where you are right now. And then also, like, are you taking care of yourself? I know we talk about self care routine a lot, Nims, but like, are you taking care of yourself and meeting your basic needs? Because a lot of times those emotions can ramp up when we're not taking care of ourselves. And again, we're trying to plan out. Like I had a reading with someone today, and she was trying to map out 20 steps ahead, right? 20 steps ahead. Like this process that she's going through, like I have to do this. And it was like, the message was coming through. You have to just be in this moment now, because if you try to project really far ahead, you're going to get yourself so psyched out. Right. And so, how many of us do that where we're jumping ahead and we're in that space of anger, projecting what's going to happen next instead of radically accepting what is right now in this present moment?
And I guess we do make it sound simple, right? It is living moment by moment, because no matter who you are, you're having that human experience and you're going to have ups and downs. But here's the beauty of it. If you don't, sometimes we need those feelings of down to truly appreciate the feelings of up, because we're meant to be having that human experience. So there's going to be times where you don't feel yourself. But again, the clues are in, if you go back to like Stacey said, when you go back to, well, when did you feel great? It probably was when you were rested, when you were doing the journaling, when you're doing the things that, kind of really lift you up. You had that self-care routine. But why do we stop doing those things? Maybe that's a question for you, Stace. When we know these things work for us, we do them regularly, but then for some reason we stop doing them, and that maybe allows us to be more vulnerable to that roller coaster effect.
I think that daily disciplines, like showing up for yourself, I think it takes commitment and it takes consistency. Um, I think it's just like asking, person has gone through this physical body transformation, lost a bunch of weight, and now they're gaining some weight back. What the heck is going on? I think life happens, right? We can have like the best of intentions, but things can happen that distract us from those things that we know help us. Life circumstances can happen. And I don't think it's about excuses. I think it's about the human experience. Like we can know those things, but we can get diverted away from them because of whatever happened today, tomorrow, yesterday. Like life is still happening. And I know for me, I know what it does for me to move my body every day. Like I know that I feel so much better when I do that. And I've been traveling, and then I've had guests, and so I've been out of my routine, and I have to like redirect now and get back into that routine, and I'm finding that there's a resistance to it, right? Like there's this like, are you kidding me, we're going to start again? And I feel that way every time I get out of the pattern, but again, like, I feel like so often life is happening and we've got to have a way to hit the reset button. And I think every day is another opportunity to hit the reset button and say, okay, what do I need now in order to move forward? Like, I can't do anything about what happened yesterday or the day before, but I can do something today to be proactive in caring for myself.
Powerful advice, and it comes back down to today. Focus on what we do today, right? Because it's like, how often do we kind of have the, oh my God, I can't believe I haven't exercised in 3 weeks. And it's like, you think, oh, you know what, it's just too hard to start again. And you put it off another day, you put it off another day, or you'll kind of say to yourself, you know what, I'm going to start tomorrow. I'm going to just enjoy today and I'm going to start tomorrow and da, da, da. And maybe that's what you do, but it's that, it is what you talk about, that, kind of that daily routine, that daily discipline of showing up for you every day. And it's that a lot of the time it's not the activity itself, it's not the exercise or whatever, it's how you're going to feel afterwards,
Mhm.
what it does to you, how much more productive it makes you. Whereas so often we focus on the activity.
Mhm.
And it's like exercise. Some people love doing exercise, but for others, it's an activity they need to go through just for their well-being. So you may not actually enjoy the exercise itself, but you enjoy how it makes you feel afterwards, how proud you are, how more energized you are. So focus on what actually works for you. If you love the exercise, then sure, focus on the exercise. But if you love the way it makes you feel, then focus on the way it makes you feel. And that's the key in kind of create that momentum.
Mhm.
So Stace, as we close out this episode, we always love kind of leaving with some journal prompts. And before we get there, is there any advice that you'd want to leave our listeners going through this journey? Um, what advice could we leave them with, and what are the journal prompts as we think about closing out this episode?
Well, so I think asking yourself the question first, have you ever been angry with God? And getting real with yourself about the answer is a great place to start. Maybe you're in a season right now where you're feeling that way, but I would encourage our listeners to take some time to ponder or write about um, a time that you have been angry with God. And then I think another question to ask is like, how did you move through that? Or how are you going to move through that? What are the steps that you need to take in order to release this so that you can create the awareness and with that spark change?
And I guess I'd also ask, last time you were angry with God, what did you learn and how did you expand? And I guess the last thing I'd say is, if you're angry with God, have a conversation with God, scream at God, and then how do you feel afterwards? And maybe journal about it. Maybe because again, what you're doing is you're creating a release, and when you have that sort of conversation with God, you're emptying your cup, and then somehow you journaling about it is a way of closing it out. But once you've emptied the cup, you've also got to fill it with something. So I'd encourage you to also then journal about it, but journal about what you want to replace it with. What are you manifesting?
Mhm.
Stacey, I love this space with you. I love the banter and the conversation, the back and forth, and the openness of the conversation. I never know what's going to come out. We just flow with it. Um, but yeah, just a reminder to everyone, we share a lot of content on social media, so please do follow us on social media. And as I said at the beginning, we love the mentorship program we're doing. It is changing lives. We are introducing a 6-week version of it. So reach out to us, schedule a DM, DM us or schedule a discovery call. It's free on either of our websites, and we can take you through the program. We love this space. We love receiving feedback. So please do, like and share the podcast. If you feel that other people would resonate from it, please actually let them know.
Yeah, and then
Um,
also we have special pricing right now on our services. So if you would like to book a joint Akashic record reading, if you would like to learn how to navigate the records, we can guide you through that process. and really excited about um, meeting as many of you as possible and really pouring into you in a way that we do here, but in an even more intimate way, working with us. So please reach out, and we're here to support you.
And just as a teaser for the next episode, so I shared my path to awakening. I love the kind of, we're going to put some structure around the podcast. So once a month, we're going to have somebody share their path to awakening. So coming up next, I mean, it always makes sense to start with the host. So I've shared my path to awakening, and Stacey shared a lot of her story in previous episodes, but she's actually going to be sharing her path to awakening next. So I'm excited to record that. I'm excited to see what comes up. I'm excited to release it. And I love this space. I love everything that we're creating. And reach out to us. Let us know if you have any feedback, any topics. Actually, we've got a couple of suggestions this week that we're going to add to the list of things that we have coming up. So sending you all so much love and light, and thank you for this space. And Stace, before we close out, I'd love to hand over to you to close us out.
Thanks, everybody, for being here with us. We'll be back again next week. Bye for now.
Bye, everybody.